The night sky above Culiacan looked like it was on fire. Helicopters thundered overhead, their spotlights cutting through smoke rising from burning trucks. Gunshots echoed down the empty streets, mixing with the sounds of sirens and people screaming in the distance. It was chaos, pure, uncontrollable chaos. And in the middle of it all, soldiers surrounded a two-story house painted pale yellow. Inside that house was Ovidio Guzman Lopez, El Raton, the son of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, once the most feared man in Mexico. But tonight, it wasn't El Chapo who held the city hostage. It was his sons. "Stay calm," Ovidio whispered to his bodyguards as the sound of automatic rifles rattled outside. His hands trembled slightly, though he tried to hide it. He knew what this meant. The military had finally come for him. Outside, a soldier shouted through a megaphone, demanding surrender. But even as he spoke, radio chatter buzzed through the city. "The Chapitos are mobilizing. Block every road. Hit every convoy." Within minutes, dozens of cartel gunmen swarmed through the streets in pickup trucks, faces hidden behind masks, heavy weapons mounted in the back. Ovidio's capture would be the spark that set Sinaloa on fire. Then came the deafening crash. A rocket-propelled grenade exploded against an armored vehicle. Windows shattered. The soldiers ducked for cover. From the hills, reinforcements poured in. The city's power grid flickered and went dark. Culiacan became a war zone, and as the army closed in, Ovidio looked out through the broken window, his city burning in his name, and whispered a single sentence that would change everything. "They're not leaving here alive." The battle for Sinaloa had begun. Months earlier, things had been quieter. The streets of Culiacan were alive with music, laughter, and the sweet smell of tacos from street vendors. Life went on as if nothing dark ever lurked beneath the surface. But for those who knew, the peace was an illusion, the calm before a storm that had been building since El Chapo's final arrest in 2016. When the old man was taken away to the U.S., everyone thought the empire would crumble. But instead, it fractured. The Guzman family, especially the younger sons, Ovidio, Ivan Archivaldo, and Jesus Alfredo, weren't going to give up what their father built. They called themselves Los Chapitos, the Little Chapas. At first, they tried to run things quietly. Ovidio, the calm one, handled the money and logistics. Ivan, known for his temper, dealt with rival groups. Alfredo, more social, more connected, kept the business relationships alive. Together, they kept their father's legacy alive, smuggling drugs across the border, keeping the cartel alive under new leadership. But not everyone agreed with how they were doing it. Across the city, another name carried equal weight: Ismael El Mayo Zambada, El Chapo's old partner and a man who had survived decades in the drug trade without ever spending a single day in prison. El Mayo believed in quiet business, invisible power. The Chapitos believed in fear and firepower. Their rivalry started small, a few shipments lost, a few men missing. But soon, bodies began appearing along roadsides. Messages were painted on walls. "Sinaloa is ours now," one read. The line was drawn. In a quiet meeting on the outskirts of the city, El Mayo's top men discussed the problem. "They're reckless," said one. "They don't understand how fragile this balance is. They think their father's name makes them untouchable," another added. El Mayo himself just nodded slowly. "Then they will learn." Back in Culiacan, Ovidio was sitting in his kitchen, a phone pressed to his ear, listening to a U.S. News report about his father's life sentence. His face showed no emotion, but his mind raced. "They think it ends with him," he said softly to Ivan, who was loading a rifle at the table. "But they don't know us." Ivan smirked. "Then let's show them." Over the following months, the city turned tense. Cartel gunmen moved in convoys through the night, checkpoints appeared at random, and whispers spread of a brewing internal war. U.S. agents monitoring the border reported new routes, new faces, and a more aggressive tone from the once stable Sinaloa organization. Then came the warning. "The government has Ovidio's location." First, no one believed it. Ovidio had been careful, always moving, never staying in one place for long. But in January 2023, everything changed. The Mexican army launched an early morning raid on a small house near Jesus Maria, a rural area outside Culiacan. Inside, Ovidio woke to the sound of helicopters and gunfire. "They found us," one of his men yelled. He grabbed his radio. "Tell Ivan, tell everyone. No one touches my people." Within minutes, the Chapitos network exploded into action. Roadblocks, burning vehicles, gunmen flooding the streets. The cartel's response was so fast, it stunned even the military. Entire neighborhoods were cut off, planes couldn't land at the airport, and innocent civilians were trapped in the crossfire. By noon, Culiacan was burning again. And as the smoke rose, people whispered the same thing. "They've come for El Raton." The streets filled with gunfire, explosions, and chaos unlike anything Mexico had seen since the days of El Chapo himself. In a nearby town, Ivan slammed his fist on the table, screaming into his phone. "Get him out, no matter what it takes." Soldiers were pinned down, police convoys destroyed. Videos flooded social media, armed men firing machine guns into the air, helicopters circling overhead, entire highways blocked by burning vehicles. Inside the military vehicle, a soldier wiped sweat from his face. "We can't hold this line, sir," he shouted. "They're everywhere." Ovidio, handcuffed in the back of another vehicle, looked calm. Too calm. He knew what was coming next. And then, from the crackling radio, a chilling voice came through, Ivan's voice. "If you don't release him," it said, "we'll burn this city to the ground." The commander hesitated. All around him, gunfire echoed and explosions shook the earth. He glanced at Ovidio, then at the chaos outside. For a moment, time froze. Then came the sound of another explosion, this one closer, and everything went black. When the smoke cleared, Ovidio was gone. No one knew exactly how. Some said he was rescued in the confusion. Others said the government let him go to stop the bloodshed. Either way, that day, January 5th, 2023, became a symbol. The day the sons of El Chapo showed Mexico and the world that they were not done yet. And in the quiet that followed, Ovidio stood in the hills outside the city, looking down at the smoldering skyline of Culiacan. His face was expressionless, but his words were cold and certain. "This is just the beginning," he said. He turned to his men. "Call the others. We have a war to finish." The night air was still filled with smoke and gunpowder. Somewhere in the distance, the city lights flickered weakly, like the heartbeat of a giant trying to survive. But deep in Sinaloa, the old alliances were breaking, and a new era of blood and betrayal had begun. As Ovidio mounted his vehicle and disappeared into the darkness, no one could have guessed what would come next. The sound of engines roared through the mountains of Sinaloa as a convoy of black trucks snaked along the dirt road. Dust rose behind them like smoke. At the front sat Ivan Archivaldo Guzman, his hands gripping the steering wheel, jaw clenched tight. Beside him, one of his men reloaded a rifle. The sun was just starting to rise, but the air already felt heavy, thick with the weight of what had just happened in Culiacan. They had pulled Ovidio out of the chaos. Barely. Ivan's phone buzzed with non-stop messages, updates, threats, warnings. The military was regrouping, the media was in a frenzy, and the government was under pressure from the United States. Everyone wanted answers. But inside the Guzman convoy, no one spoke. The only sound was the hum of engines and the crackle of the radio. Then, a voice broke through. "They want a response, Ivan. The streets are talking. People are scared." Ivan's eyes stayed on the road. "Good," he said coldly. "Let them be scared." In the back seat, Ovidio sat quietly, staring out the window. His face was pale, his eyes tired. The last 24 hours had turned him into both a legend and a target. The government had underestimated him once, but they wouldn't make that mistake again. He knew they'd come back, stronger, smarter, and angrier. "You shouldn't have come for me," Ovidio said quietly. "Now they'll come for all of us." Ivan laughed bitterly. "They already were." He looked at his brother. "You think they'd stop after you?" They want all the Guzmans gone. You, me, everyone. That's not going to happen. The convoy reached a hidden ranch deep in the hills, a place surrounded by tall fences and guarded by men carrying assault rifles. It was one of their strongholds, a safe zone built for moments like this. Inside the main house, maps covered the walls. Routes, supply lines, names of allies and enemies marked with red ink. On one table sat a small radio scanner, tuned to military frequencies. Ivan slammed his keys down. We need to hit back before they do. If they think they can take one of us, we'll show them what happens next. But Ovidio raised a hand. No, not yet. You saw what happened yesterday. The people suffered, not them. The army doesn't care if the city burns, Ivan. They care about image. They'll use this to justify bringing more soldiers, maybe even US agents. Ivan glared at him. So what? We hide. We plan, Ovidio replied calmly. Father always said a war you rush into is a war you lose. There was silence. Then one of their lieutenants, a thin man with a scar across his neck, stepped forward. We lost men. We lost money. We can't just wait. Ovidio's eyes narrowed. We didn't lose. We survived. That's a message. He turned back to the window, looking toward the horizon. And when the time is right, we'll make sure everyone remembers the name Guzman again. In Mexico City, news stations played endless footage of the Culiacan chaos. Reporters stood in front of burned cars, counting the dead and injured. The government claimed victory, saying Ovidio had been recaptured. But hours later, the truth leaked. He was free again. President López Obrador held a press conference, his voice steady but tense. The government acted to protect lives, he said. No criminal is above the law. But the people weren't convinced. Many whispered that the government had surrendered to the Chapitos, that fear, not peace, ruled Sinaloa now. Across the border, in Washington, DEA and Homeland Security officials met behind closed doors. Satellite images of Culiacan glowed on screens, red dots marking gunfire and explosions. They're getting stronger, one agent said. Every time we hit them, they regroup faster. The sons are smarter than the father. Another nodded. And more violent. The DA director leaned forward. Then we treat them like what they are, the most dangerous organization in Mexico. He turned to his team. Find every link, every supplier, every ally. We're taking down the Chapitos. Back in Sinaloa, the Guzman brothers weren't just sitting still. They were rebuilding. Ovidio spent his days in the ranch's command room, studying maps and messages. He had contacts in Colombia, in Guatemala, even in the US border towns. His mind worked like a machine, always planning, always watching. Ivan, on the other hand, was restless. He didn't care about planning. He wanted revenge. He met with local commanders, recruiting more men, gathering weapons, promising loyalty and money. If El Mayo wants a fight, he told them, he'll get one. But deep down, Ovidio knew the real war wasn't just with El Mayo or the military. It was between themselves. The Guzman brothers had different visions of what the cartel should be. Ivan wanted control through fear. Ovidio wanted stability through calculation. One night, the two stood outside the ranch, the moonlight casting long shadows across the dirt. We can't keep doing this, Ovidio said. You're making too much noise. Ivan smirked. Noise is power. People fear noise. People remember silence, Ovidio replied. Father ruled because no one could find him until it was too late. Ivan stepped closer. Father's gone. His rules died with him. The tension hung thick between them. For the first time, Ovidio realized the war inside Sinaloa wasn't just against the government. It was between brothers. Suddenly, one of their men rushed out from the main house. Patron, we've got something. They followed him inside. On the screen was a live feed from a local contact, a convoy of trucks heading toward the mountains. It's El Mayo's people, the man said. They're moving in fast. Ovidio leaned in. How many? Maybe 20 trucks. Ivan's fists clenched. They're coming for us. The room went silent. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the dark hills. Ovidio stared at the screen, the headlights moving closer with every second. "Then it begins," he said. "Lock down the perimeter. No one leaves." Ivan smiled, his eyes burning with fury. Finally, within minutes, the ranch came alive. Men grabbing rifles, vehicles being moved, radios crackling with orders. The sound of metal clashing filled the air. In the distance, faint flashes of headlights appeared at the foot of the hills. The Guzman brothers stood side by side, silent but ready. And as the first shots rang out, Ovidio whispered to himself, "This isn't my war." But it was too late. The war had already found him. Bullets tore through the night. The first truck exploded, lighting up the hillside. Men shouted orders, smoke filled the air, and the sound of gunfire echoed across the valley. Ivan ducked behind a wall, firing back at the approaching convoy. Ovidio grabbed a radio. "Fall back to the secondary line. Keep them away from the main house." But the attackers kept coming, trained, organized, and determined. This wasn't random. This was El Mayo's message. No one is untouchable. A grenade exploded near the gate, sending 2 of Ovidio's men flying backward. He ran to help, dragging one to safety. Dust and blood mixed in the air. "Where's Ivan?" he shouted. "By the trucks," a guard replied. Ovidio sprinted across the yard as tracer rounds zipped past. He found his brother crouched beside a burning SUV, reloading. "They're inside the fence," Ivan yelled. Ovidio looked around. The ranch was chaos. He could see silhouettes moving in the firelight, men falling one after another. He grabbed Ivan's shoulder. "We can't win this tonight. Fall back now." But Ivan shook his head.